This week, my son, Caden, he's 5 years old, called me at the office to tell me he had a surprise for me when I got home. Well, I drove in the driveway, the whole family was outside, and the big surprise was he had learned to ride his bicycle without the training wheels. So Eric and I stood on the side of the road and cheered him on as he navigated his way up and down the street. And I started thinking about all the things that Eric and I hope to teach our children, and all the things that my parents hoped to teach me as I grew up. You know, when we talk about raising our kids or passing our faith, we tend to talk in terms of construction, don't we? We talk about building their faith, building their character, laying a strong foundation. I started thinking about the numerous things that my parents tried to teach me. It was kind of as if they were handing me bricks, and these are bricks of truth. And they would tell me something and basically give me this brick, and then I'd have to test it to see if it was true or not. My parents would tell me, the stove that's hot is going to burn you. Of course, I'd have to test it and find out that's true. My parents wanted me to grow up and they wanted me to learn things, and so they tell me about math, and 2 plus 2 is 4. They told me about the ABCs. And each time, each bit of information was handing me a brick. And what I would do is I would sort out the bricks. And I'd start finding out the things that are true, and I'd put them into a truth pile, because I knew these were firm and these were concrete and I could build my life around them. But my mom and my dad, they wanted me to behave a certain way. And so there's some things that they told me that weren't so true. Now, they weren't lies, but they were attempts to modify my behavior. I would stick out my tongue a lot. And so my mom would say, if you do it again, it's going to stick that way. Or if you cross your eyes, they're going to freeze that way. Or if you sit too close to the TV, you're going to go blind. And often on a night when I was out of bed one too many times, my dad would take me aside and say, next time you get out of bed, the boogeyman's going to get you. Well, after a while, I would test these things too. And I found out they weren't the same as a hot stove. So I created a different pile. In this pile, these not-so-true bricks, I started building a pile over here. And isn't that how we go through life? Every time somebody teaches us something new, we test it, we sort it, we have our truths, our absolute truths, the things that we can build our lives on. Then we have our not-so-true. Well, at some point, for many of us it's our parents, but maybe for you it's your grandparents, a coach or a teacher, some adult that you respected. They gave you a brick, and this brick was about God. And they told you about Jesus, and they told you stories from the Bible. And you have to decide where you're going to place this brick. We're not so sure we can put it in the absolute truth pile because we can't test it the same way. And we don't feel comfortable putting it in the pile with the boogeyman or the other not-so-truths. So what do we do with this brick? Well, for most of us, when we receive the stories of the Bible and the Old Testament stories, the New Testament stories, what we do is we started a third pile. And we put this pile in the middle, and what we think is this is our church pile and our God pile. And so the way it sorted out for us was you had your absolute truth, your non-truths or your not-so-truths, and then in the pile, the third pile, is our true for us pile. Now we're kind of protected of this pile. We don't really want to push it on anybody, and there may be not a whole lot of people in our lives we even want to tell it about because our friends or our families may not understand this pile. See, there's just one problem with this pile. It really doesn't exist. You see, there's only two options. Either it's true, and it's concrete and it's solid, or it's not. And so on Easter, of all days, we're confronted with a brick that we've got to decide where we're going to place. You see, the whole message of Easter is the tomb of Jesus. Is it empty or not? And see, that's a question, that's a brick of truth that we have to deal with. Because how you deal with this truth, how you deal with this fact that dead tissue was animated again, that air filled lungs that had long since deceased, that a heart pumped again, and that ultimately a man who was dead got up and walked out of a tomb. How you deal with that, where you place this brick, will determine everything else in your life. So the challenge for you this Easter, as we wrestle with the brick that says, is the tomb of Jesus empty or not? The challenge for you is, where will you place this brick?